Part 48. My koi sister is 3.5 years old. Author, Xia Sheng. Chapter 471. Chapter 471 Fu Huizi. The young man was standing in the imperial study room wearing a bright yellow dragon robe. All the officials in the imperial study were trembling with fear. Your Majesty, you have reached the age of 16 and it is time for the draft. The Supreme Emperor is monogamous, and I only have 2 children, you and the eldest princess. The dragon heirs are few, and the people of Vietnam are unstable. Your Majesty. Several old ministers continued to persuade. Not to mention filling the harem, you must at least choose a few. The minister jumped anxiously. You just ascended the throne today, can't you wait any longer? The young emperor looked at the courtiers angrily. He turned around and asked the young again, what time is it now? It's too late to return to your Majesty. The emperor looked out the window. His father, the emperor, his mother, the empress, and sister, why haven't they come back yet? Seeing the emperor in a daze, the ministers became anxious. Old God Yanchuan stood in front with his eyes closed. Uncle Guo, please give me some advice. Someone pulled Yanchuan's sleeve. Master Chief Assistant, your Majesty has no brothers, wives, concubines, or heirs. This is an extremely unstable factor for the court and the people. Yanchuan sighed and opened his eyes. The little emperor's eyes are disappointed. Uncle, do you also want to persuade me? He has no idea of monogamy. After all, his heart belongs to no one. There is no difference between one person and a group. Yanchuan said calmly, Your Majesty was in charge of government at the age of 6, overseeing the country at the age of 8, and ascended the throne as emperor at the age of 16. As long as the child is born early, the throne can be abdicated early. The emperor, who looked bored, immediately sat up straight. He looked at his uncle with burning eyes. What my uncle said is good, what my uncle said is wonderful, and what my uncle said is awesome. Her father, the emperor, and her mother traveled all over the world, and his sister could travel to the world, but he was the only one trapped in the palace. The uncle's casual words made the emperor nod. Get it done quickly. The courtiers looked ecstatic. The ancestors of Dai Viet bless me. Your Majesty, no matter how fast it is, it will still have to be done next year. Hu Bulletin beamed, and it started from preparation to registration to the first round of screening. It won't be until next year at the earliest. The uncle nodded slightly. Next year the emperor will be 17 and the final round of screening will be carried out. Basically, the emperor will be 18. It won't hurt His Majesty's vitality. The civil and military officials of the entire dynasty had settled their worries, and there was wind in their steps when they left, hurrying to prepare for the draft. When Xiao Ziyan pushed the door open, the young emperor was grabbing a flower like a madman, pulling the petals and muttering, come back, not come back, not come back. The shadow was in front of his eyes, and the emperor waved his hand. I told you, don't come into the palace and disturb me if you have nothing to do. Before he could finish his words, the little girl rushed straight into his arms. Brother, a sharp cry made the emperor suddenly startled. He looked at his sister in front of him blankly. Xiao Yanyan's ears were slightly red. She hadn't seen him for more than 10 years, and she was still somewhat alienated in her heart. Looking at Fu Huizi's silly look, it seemed that he was seeing his stupid look when he was a child again. She couldn't hold it back and rushed forward. With just one glance, you can feel the intimacy of blood connection. The emperor trembled slightly and hugged his sister gently without letting go. Brother, aren't you dreaming? Yanyan has gone home. My sister is back. The emperor's voice was trembling. He had been looking forward to it every day since his sister left. Hope. Looking forward to her coming home every day. I'm home. Brother, the little girl said a little aggrievedly, her eyes slightly red. The nasal sound can't help but become a bit heavier. It seemed as if the sword stabbed by Wen Mingxian started to hurt again. Are you being wronged outside? Fu Huizi saw her eyes were red, and he couldn't help but blush. My sister was born with no fear of anything. She protected him and coaxed him like a little adult. Now that he saw his sister's face full of grievances, Fu Huizi couldn't help but feel sad. I'm not wronged. I just haven't seen my brother for a long time and I feel homesick, Xiao Ji said through tears and smiled, and his tone was unconsciously a little squeamish. She used to be old-fashioned, but now she looks like a pretty girl in her late teens. In front of familiar people, she can be herself without any defense. Whether Wen Mingxian or Emperor Junhua, they are all passers-by in her life. She knows her future very well. Also cherish the rare kinship. Fu Juxiao and Yan Sushui stood outside the door and did not disturb them. In those days and nights when you and I were not around, they supported each other, comforted each other, and spent one scary night after another. This relationship cannot be compared even between the two of us. Sushui held Fu Juxiao's hand and whispered softly. Sigh. Those days when she offered sacrifices, she could never make up for the child's shortcomings. Fu Juxiao hugged her. It's not your fault. Fu Huizi took his sister and left the imperial study in a grand manner. Sister, look, this is the cradle where we lived when we were children. And the dormitory where we lived when we were children. I will seal this place, and everything will be as it is. Well, there are still those two peach demons. Do you remember Tao Rui and Tao Lu? Tao Rui has been guarding your dormitory for you. Outside the bedroom, Dao Yui saw the face that was exactly the same as His Majesty's, and immediately cried and knelt down. This slave finally waits for the return of the young master. Get up quickly, Sister Dao Yui. Zion still remembered her. Where is the peach blossom? Xiao Yanyan was a little curious, as these two peach blossoms were never separated. The emperor chuckled. She insists on saying that she has mastered the nascent soul, saying that she has a chubby and round little baby inside. She is obviously a demon. Where did the nascent soul come from? We don't take it seriously. It wasn't until 10 months after she was pregnant that she gave birth to a baby. The emperor couldn't help stroking his eyebrows. It turned out that she was secretly in love with a poor scholar, but she kept it a secret and refused to tell him. She secretly used her monthly money to help him study. Later, the scholar found out that she was a demon and ran away. Now, she lives with her children. Outside the palace. Xiao Yanyan shook her head. Men in the world are so ruthless. Men will only affect the speed at which I draw my sword. The emperor's eyes were filled with heartache. His sister was going out to endure the tribulation and to experience a complete life. Sure enough, he was injured. Fu Huizi still thought too simply, and never thought that his sister would be killed by his wife on their wedding night. Sister, you can remain unmarried for the rest of your life, and my brother will support you. Fu Huizi patted his sister on the shoulder. Sister has changed so much. It was so big that it made his heart ache. At a young age, my eyes are full of vicissitudes of life, and I don't know what I have experienced. Where is Grandma? Yanyan misses Grandma so much. Grandma cried for a long time before leaving. Yanyan thought of Mrs. Lin, that kind old man, and couldn't help but ask. Fu Hui was startled. After a long silence, she said, after you left, Grandma always wanted to take care of her health and wait until you came home. But at that time, something happened to my mother. She cried every day and was distressed for many years. You left Lja in a hurry again. Grandma didn't say anything on her face, but her eyes were red every day. You are young, how can she not be worried? After you left, she only lasted for 6 years before she ran out of money. Yanyan couldn't help but think of that kind old lady. Crying. The journey to heaven is far more cruel than she imagined. End of this chapter. My koi sister is 3.5 years old. Author, Xia Shengsheng. Chapter 472. Chapter 472, The Strongest Relative in History. Fu Huizi took his sister to Lin's cemetery. The Yan family built a large ancestral hall, right next to the Temple of War. The Temple of War receives continuous worship from the people every day. The ancestors of the Yan family will also be able to get some incense from the gods and be blessed by the gods in the future. Xiao Yuer's eyes turned red immediately when she saw Lin's memorial tablet in the ancestral hall. Grandma promised me that she would take good care of herself, but she still didn't wait for Yanyan to come back. Xiao Yuer always remembered the kind old man. There are 3 biological uncles in the family, but my mother was the only one who was abandoned and adopted. She was worried that her mother did not have the love of her parents, so she gave more love to her mother. Mother was born as the creator, her character was not crippled, and she has a lot to do with her grandmother. My mother had a lot of hardships in her life, and my grandmother was worried about her. Fu Huizi picked up 3 sticks of incense, lit them with red eyes, and handed them to his sister. The tone was a little hesitant, but in the end there was no concealment. I didn't want to tell you, but I think you have the right to know. After my mother's accident, my grandmother held on for a while, thinking that we had no parents to take care of us, so she would visit us every day. Later, my mother gathered her spirits and returned. After she was so sad and happy, her body collapsed all of a sudden. That breath just disappeared. Half done. If she is well cared for and nourished by her mother's spiritual energy for so many years, she can live for a long time. But you are only a few years old, and you have to go through reincarnation and experience life, separation, and death. Grandma was instantly crushed. After you left, she lingered on the sick bed. She lasted for 6 years. During those 6 years, she could barely eat anything. She had to ask her every day, "Is Yanyan back?" Before she left, she was so skinny that even her mother couldn't bear to look at her anymore. She would rather she just leave, at least not having to suffer. Xiao Xian's tears fell suddenly. Grandma never closed her eyes before she left. She kept looking in the direction you left. The year after my grandmother left, my grandfather Yan Hanzhong also passed away. Xiao Xian held the incense candle and her whole body was trembling. She vaguely remembered that at that time she was always frightened by the horrific images of her mother's sacrifice. I always wake up at night. Even if it rains heavily, my grandmother will come into the palace to comfort her. The old man devoted all his love for his daughter to himself and his brother. Xiao Xian held the incense and was about to kneel down. "I can't do it. Your identity doesn't allow me to do it." Dao Yui couldn't help but stop her. She was now the incarnation of the law of heaven, and mortals couldn't bear her worship. Xiao Xian pushed Tao Rui away, his eyes unmistakable. Grandma is a wise elder and can afford it. She looked at the sky. "I say, if you can bear it, then you can bear it." Dark clouds appeared at some point and blocked the sun. Xian slowly knelt down and kowtowed 3 times to the old lady's memorial tablet. At the moment of kowtow, the wind and clouds changed color, but no other celestial phenomenon occurred. This made Tao Rui breathe a sigh of relief. After Xian stood up, he made a small hand to make a secret. He frowned slightly. But seeing that her family members were all in front of her, she didn't say much. "I just smiled and met with my 3 uncles and aunts, as well as my younger brothers and sisters at home. Speaking of which, those older brothers, sisters, and younger brothers and sisters seemed to be a little afraid of her. You have now completed a lifetime of experience, and you have the power of God to remain calm. It is normal for them to be afraid of you." Huaiji gave his sister her favorite food. "They don't know that Tiandao is their sister. They will probably have to wait until death to enjoy this honor." Fu Huizi grinned secretly. Nowadays, almost no one in the world knows that she is the way of heaven and a god. Only 3 uncles knew that she had gone through the calamity, and even her aunts thought that she was being raised away from home due to poor health. "Yanyan, you are finally home. Just come back, just come back." The ant wiped tears from her red eyes. Zion has been living outside for more than 10 years, and now it's good to go home. The second ant touched her temples unnaturally. Her husband is Yan Lang, who has become the of war in the world and enjoys a good reputation in the world. The appearance has always been the same as when he was young. But the second ant's appearance has aged, and her hair on the temples has been dyed white. The third aunt and the third uncle are both very good at business, and they have built a business empire of their own. The whole family had a happy meal. Several aunts even prepared generous gifts to welcome Xiao Ziyan home. Xiao Ziyan knew that the three aunts were pure and kind-hearted, so he secretly folded 3 yellow talismans and injected a breath into them. This is a thank you gift from my 3 aunts. Several aunts did not know her identity and did not dislike her. Instead, they took care of her and took care of her. After Xiao Ziyan left, the chief minister of Yanchuan, who had already dominated the government and the public, suddenly said, quickly, take out the yellow talisman. Place it on the incense. Send someone to guard it day and night. The ladies were stunned for a moment. Yan Lang squinted his eyes and chuckled, brother is right, just listen to him. It is a blessing for future generations, a magic lamp that can summon the dragon to make wishes, a gift from heaven, a good thing that even the gods cannot ask for. Although the Yan family was a little shocked, Yan Chuan had always been the head of the family. Yan Chuan has been the chief assistant for so many years and has seen countless good things, things that can shock him to the point of losing his composure, so the Yan family naturally takes it to heart. Dang Ji found 3 boxes and offered them on top of the incense. After Xiao Ziyan left the Yan family, he went to visit his aunt again. Auntie said it was safe. Ping'an and Zhou have a very good relationship. They have a son and a daughter. When they see little Ziyan, they shed tears again. By the time Xiao Ziyan left, it was already late at night. Sister, are you worried today? Fu Huizi has been paying attention to his sister's mood, but she was not in a good mood when she came back from the ancestral hall. Ziyan pursed his lips and said, when grandma passed away, were my parents by my side? Huizi shook his head, not really. At that time, your natal heart light flashed so fiercely that your parents did not dare to leave. The heart lamp is the spiritual lamp that Fu Ziyan lit with a trace of his heart's blood when he went down to the next world. It can determine good or bad luck. The way of heaven is going through calamities, and outsiders cannot interfere with it. Yan Sushui and Fu Juxiao were afraid of making things worse and had not dared to investigate for fear of causing irreversible consequences. Her good or bad luck can only be inferred from the heart lamp. That day, your heart light flashed extremely hard, it almost went out. Fu Huizi still remembers that his mother was crying so hard that she couldn't stand up. Fu Ziyan frowned slightly. It must have been the day when she was tempted to stay in the mortal world and spend her life with Wen Mingxian, but she was stabbed to death with a sword. When your heart light is stable, your grandmother will have been taken away by the messenger. Fu Ziyan nodded. After being silent for a while, he said, I figured my grandma has not yet been reincarnated, and I want to visit the underworld. How is that possible? She has been dead for several years. If she stayed in the underworld, she would have become a lonely ghost. Fu Huizi was shocked. Don't tell your parents yet. Mother hasn't recovered yet, and the underworld is full of yin energy, which is not conducive to her recovery. This is also the reason why Fu Juxiao never took her to the underworld. Fu Huizi was so worried that he could only watch his sister go to hell. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. My koi sister is 3.5 years old. Author, Xia Sheng. Chapter 473. Chapter 473, Impersonation. Since ancient times, the gate of hell has been a door that separates the mortal world from the underworld. Every year before July and a half, the door of cannot be closed. But at this moment, she had just landed on this land. The door to will be opened in an instant. The incarnation of the way of heaven is coming, who dares not to obey? Since she entered, the gate of was instantly closed. She especially remembered that when she was young, she didn't know how to restrain herself. The golden light of heaven is swaying in the underworld, and wherever you go, there is nothing. Countless souls in the underworld have disappeared. The moment she entered the door today, her whole body was sealed. Fuzion entered the underworld, and all the gods in the underworld were stunned. Shua. A ray of light is coming towards the gate of hell. All the ghosts were stunned. The first palace of King Guang of Qin. The king of Shujiang in the second palace. 3 palaces, the Song Emperor, the 4th palace, the official king, the 5th palace, the Yama king, the 6th palace, the Biancheng king, the 7th palace, the Taishan king, the 8th palace, the city king, the 9th palace, the equal king, and the 10th palace, the wheel-turning king, all prostrate at her feet. Meet Xiao Tiandao. Fuzion was startled, the position of Emperor Fengdu is still vacant. Tiandao really has an excellent memory. When she was going through the calamity, she only mentioned it accidentally. Emperor Fengdu is scattered across the 3 realms, and a new leader has not yet been elected. The underworld is different from other positions. The gods cannot provoke the yin energy for a long time, and they must be able to suppress the 18 levels of demons. So, all the palace masters were in a bit of a dilemma. Since Emperor Fengdu left, their workload has increased tenfold. King Qin Guang is in the 1st palace, and the 10 palaces respect him, and most of them require him to make decisions. Now it seems that it is about to collapse. It's hard for you. Look for it 13,000 miles southeast. As soon as Fuzion said these words, Yama of the 10th palace immediately thanked him happily. Thank you so much for God's help. Thank you very much. I wonder if you are coming today. Yama of the 10th palace was a little confused. I came to look for the elder in my family. She was not reincarnated after a few years after her death. I came to see her. The Yamas of the 10th hall were all a little panicked. The ghost will not be reincarnated for a long time, and will become a lonely ghost, and even slowly lose the memory of the past. Little God, the little God has been busy with the affairs of the underworld, and he didn't even know about this. Yanjun hurriedly apologized. I was crying in my heart. It was not a big deal for the elders of Tiandao to pick her up in person. Fuzion only smiled and said, Yanjun is busy, so there is no need to be distracted by such trivial matters. Just follow the rules and regulations of the underworld. Yanjun said yes, but he was very serious in his heart. If he can have a relationship with the way of heaven, he would be stupid to not take it seriously. Hey, your relatives are here. Yanjun counted with his fingers, and it happened that her blood elders were not far away. Only. How did her relatives and elders get out of the 18th level of hell? Before he could ask for the truth, he appeared at the exit of the 18th level of hell. Ms. Lee, you have done all the bad things in your previous life and spent 18 years in the tongue-pulling hell, the evil mirror hell, the oil pot hell, and the stone-pressed hell where you abandoned your baby. Now that you have served your sentence, you can be released from prison. In the next life, I will be reborn in the animal realm. The old lady was covered in blood and was crying and trembling. I won't be a beast, I won't be a beast, I won't be a beast. The old lady was crying and fussing. It's not my fault, it's Yan Jiao's fault. Yin Chai glanced at her and said, Yan Jiao made a big mistake and blasphemed the goddess. She will never be reincarnated again and will be trapped in the 18th level of forever. The old lady shivered. When Yama from the 10th palace came, all the Yin servants knelt down to pay their respects. Meet Yama. He glanced at Fuzion and didn't know what to call him. You can feel the overwhelming pressure on her body, but she is one step away from the way of heaven. This is a noble person from the god realm. She came to find her deceased grandmother. Please inquire quickly. Yin Chai has a chill all over his body. He can make Yama call him a noble person, but how can he be an ordinary god? Li shrank her head and hid in the corner covered in blood. She recognized the 10 palaces of Yama, which were in charge of the entire underworld and were the greatest officials in the entire underworld. But the greatest official humbled himself in front of that little girl, and he didn't know who the little girl was. It would be great if I could gain some connections. The old lady's face was full of jealousy, and she didn't know who was so lucky to have such an outstanding granddaughter who could make all the 10 gods of flatter her. Is this the child of the goddess? Yin Chai was startled when he saw Xiao Xian. Back then, I sent you to go through the calamity. I see that you look familiar, and I have some vague memories. Yin Cha, who looked fierce in front of Yin Han just now, is now very respectful in front of Xiao Tiandao. The old lady next to her suddenly raised her head. Granddaughter, granddaughter, you are my granddaughter, the old lady's shrill scream rang out, causing everyone to frown. She staggered out of the corner, her face full of ecstasy. It was her, it was her. She is the lucky old lady. It's me, child, it's me. I'm my grandmother. Is your mother Yan Sushui? I'm your biological grandmother. My child. Mrs. Li was the old lady of the Yan family. Old lady Yan cried with snot and tears. Grandma misses you so much, darling, darling, what's your name, darling, why are you here? Grandma has suffered a lot. Grandma was wrongly accused. That Yan Jiao took your mother's place back then. Grandma was heartbroken. Grandma was deceived by bad people. The old lady pulled the hem of Fu Xian's skirt and cried blood. Yin Cha's complexion suddenly changed at his side. He fell to his knees with a crash. They actually offended the family members of noble people? All the Yamas in the 10 palaces took a breath, and King Qin Guang secretly said goodbye. That's right, she was the blood relative. How could you go to the 18th level of to be punished? Xiao Tian. King Qin Guang paused, unwilling to reveal Tiandao's identity. My dear sir, there may be some misunderstanding about this matter. I will ask someone to find out and give you an explanation. Come quickly, please bring this lady to the main hall to freshen up, Yamamoto said hurriedly. The old lady's brows were slightly happy, and the group of shady villains who made her fearful were trembling under her granddaughter's feet. Hello, how old is her granddaughter? The Yamas of the 10 palaces all asked her for forgiveness. Fu Xian raised his hand slightly. Are you really my grandmother? Xiao Xiao's tone was a little sarcastic. Ms. Li hurriedly grabbed the hem of her skirt and said urgently, it's me, it's me. My child, the one I love most is your mother. But in the end, you were deceived by a bitch. We are connected by blood. The old lady saw that everyone was fawning over Fu Xian, and she was not willing to let go. She has been in the 18th level of for quite a while, and her days are like years. She didn't dare to go to the beast road. She was born to be slaughtered. How could she want to? Xiao Xian sneered. Pointing to the blank-eyed woman in white on the Nahi bridge, he asked, you are my grandmother, then who is she? The little girl's tone was full of sarcasm. End of this chapter. My koi sister is 3.5 years old. Author, Xia Sheng. Chapter 474. Chapter 474 Karma. Old Mrs. Yan looked towards Nahi Bridge. His eyes narrowed suddenly. It's Lin's. That peasant woman who adopted Yan Sushui. That peasant woman whom she looked down upon, but who was born to live a better life than her. Are you worthy of being my grandmother? Fu Xian's eyes were full of disgust and sarcasm. Yin Cha took one look and immediately stepped forward to pull old Mrs. Yan away. Let go of me, let go of me, I am your maternal grandmother, I am your relative. Who is Lin? She is just an ignorant and vulgar peasant woman, Mrs. Yan shouted angrily. Farmer woman, Xiao Xian chuckled. Oh, you died early, didn't you know that? My eldest uncle has great power in the government and is the youngest chief minister of the dynasty. The second uncle is famous all over the world as an orthodox who enjoys the fireworks of the world. The third uncle's property is spread all over the world. My father, the emperor, is the emperor. The new emperor who succeeds now is my brother. Farmer woman, grandma, she is the woman with the best fate in the world, and the most envied woman in the world. And my mother is the goddess of the three realms, and has the power to save the world. Xiao Ziyan paused. The 10th Hall Lama vaguely saw some signs, and immediately continued, you don't know yet, do you? This little nobleman will control the god realm in the future. The gods will all respect her. The more Mrs. Yan listened, the more she collapsed, and tears of blood flowed from her eyes. She has always looked down upon Lin, but she didn't know that Lin's prestige is so high now. Why, it's all mine, it's mine. She robbed me of my good life, robbed me of it. Originally it was all mine, everything is mine. I am Yan Sushui's mother, and I am your grandmother. Come back to me, come back to me. The old lady's voice was stern, and when she saw the mighty and powerful people following the girl, she was so angry that she was bleeding from all her orifices. O Lord of the three realms, all gods respect her. Fu Ziyan didn't even look back, paying no attention to the pleading and crying sounds behind him. The mother was abandoned at birth, and she knew it. I also know who that shameless old lady is. It was Mrs. Yan who drowned her mother and regarded her as evil. Fu Ziyan walked to the end of Nahi Bridge and saw the white-haired old man in front of him stopped, his eyes full of sadness. The mighty big guys behind him stopped one after another. Yin Chai said hurriedly, this old lady's surname is Lin. She has perfect merits and a long life. But she was too worried and died early. After death, because of worries in my heart, I didn't want to be reincarnated or drink mangpo soup. I waited at Nahi Bridge every day. How long Yin Chai stays in the underworld, she will gradually lose her memory of the mortal world. Now she has forgotten the past. Fu Ziyan took a deep breath and squatted in front of Mrs. Lin. I saw my grandmother, who had always been sober, with cloudy eyes, without a trace of clarity. Muttered in a low voice, wait for words, wait for words. Wait for words. These three words seemed to be engraved into her bones, and she kept saying them. Fu Ziyan's tears fell instantly. Grandma, Yanyan is here. Yanyan has gone home, Grandma, Yanyan has come home. Xiao Ziyan hugged Ms. Lin and cried. Lin was still unconscious and kept mumbling. Yamluo whispered, first, please invite the old lady to sit in the Yama hall. Everyone stood on both sides and greeted Mr. Lin respectfully. Old Mrs. Yan's eyes were red with jealousy as her head was being held captive by Yin Zheng. Mine, all the glory, wealth, and honor are mine, everything is mine. Ms. Lin, you has taken away my glory, it all belongs to me. Two old ladies, one of whom was surrounded by countless big shots and greeted respectfully. The other one was kicked by Yin Cha and sent to the animal path. The two sides parted ways and each had a new life. Fu Ziyan was extremely heartbroken when he saw his grandmother in this state. When a living soul stays in the underworld, it will damage the mind, and it is also to clear the memory and reincarnate. The old lady retained the memory because people who are punished in the 18th have to repent for their mistakes every day. The old lady Yan kept the memory because she wanted to repent every day. Mrs. Lin took out a dark thing from her arms and stuffed it into Fu Ziyan's hand. Her eyes were still cloudy, but her tone was a little cautious, eat, Yanyan eats. Leave it for Yanyan. Fu Ziyan pinched the sticky stuff and shed tears. It happened to be low in Lin's palm. Lin was startled. The eyes regained clarity for a moment. There was also a red mark on the palm of my hand. Yanyan, Ms. Lin suddenly exclaimed. Fu Ziyan cried loudly, holding Ms. Lin in her arms and crying. It's unfilial words that keep grandma waiting for a long time. The little girl's eyes were red from crying. Not long after, grandma is waiting. My dear, grandma's dear, you have suffered. Ms. Lin hugged Zion and refused to let go. The two of them stayed in the underworld for half an hour. The judge looked through the book of life and death and found that she had been kind to the God of creation in nurturing her, and she had also been kind to Xiao Tiandao. This kindness was so great that the judge raised his eyebrows. After you entered the underworld, you didn't go to the palace of life and death at all, the judge patted his forehead. With your merits, you can enter the immortal class and live as long as the gods. The gods you can choose now include the earth god, the bedside mother-in-law, etc. Lin smiled and declined. It's good to be immortal. Mortal life is short, but Lin likes this ordinary happiness very much. The separation is always quick, but Lin and Fu Ziyan reluctantly parted. But Xiao Ziyan did not dare to miss the time of her grandmother's reincarnation again, so she personally took her grandmother to the reincarnation platform with Mengpo soup. This is the path of mortals, that is the path of animals. As soon as the judge finished the introduction, he heard angry curses coming from the animal track next door. Everyone looked at it. I don't want to be reincarnated as a pig, I don't want to be reincarnated as a pig. My granddaughter is a god, you can't do this to me. Mrs. Lin, these have taken advantage of my blessing. Old Mrs. Yan refused to resist, so Yanzai kicked her down hard, screaming repeatedly. Oh, that's not right, why is she still calling her granddaughter a god? Yanzai's eyes widened in shock. Before he finished speaking, someone could be heard saying quietly, it seems that, I forgot to drink Mengpo soup. Xiao Ziyan looked at it for a while. Didn't you drink Mengpo soup and fall into the realm of animals? Fu Ziyan's mouth twitched. Cruel, cruel, and inhumane. But so happy. Hey, she is the Dao of heaven, not the Holy Mother. Evil people will be rewarded with evil, that is her ultimate philosophy. Xiao Ziyan personally sent his grandmother to the reincarnation stage, and felt a little more at ease. After Mrs. Lin left, the judge said, the old lady has an excellent destiny in this life. She will die in peace and live a peaceful and happy life. Fu Ziyan hummed softly. He said goodbye to Yama of the 10th palace and left the underworld. The moment she left the underworld, she felt a strange aura. She wanted to avoid it. But his eyes flickered slightly, and then he slowly fell down. End of this chapter. My koi sister is 3.5 years old. Author, Xia Sheng. Chapter 475. Chapter 475 Abducted. Strong hands hugged her around the waist. Fu Ziyan fell limply in his arms. The little Taoist boy was already so frightened that he froze in place. Emperor, what are you doing? The Taoist boy screamed. What is the emperor doing? What is the emperor doing? Junhua hugged Xiao Yuer and felt that the missing piece in his heart was slowly filling up. The corners of his lips pursed slightly. The emperor who once controlled the laws of the divine world with aloofness was now without any composure. The whole person has a hint of madness. And, faintly humble. Emperor, do you know what you are doing? You can't take little Tiandao back to the depths of the Cloud Palace. You can't do this, it's against the rules. Emperor, please stop. Emperor, the last life has passed, please let go. We can't make any more mistakes. The little Taoist boy shivered in fear. He actually kidnapped Xiao Tiandao and took him back to the depths of Yun Palace. Deep inside the Cloud Palace is the palace of the Emperor. Emperor Junhua didn't say a word, he just took the little fish and soared into the clouds. The little Taoist boy bit his lip, but did not dare to report it to the Emperor of Heaven. Little Tiandao is destined by fate, and the entire three realms are looking forward to her return. No one is allowed to blaspheme or think too much. Dao Tong finally caught up. But how long can this matter be concealed? The way of heaven is driven by destiny, and no one can stop her from returning to her throne. The emperor entered the cloud palace with Xiao Yu'er in his arms, and then the gate of the cloud palace was tightly closed. He dismissed all his disciples, and no one was allowed to enter the cloud palace. When Xiao Yu'er opened his eyes, he saw the simple and complicated patterns on the ceiling and sighed softly. When she got up from the collapse, she saw Emperor Junhua, dressed in green clothes, setting out a meal. Xiao Yu'er was stunned for a moment. He was wearing Wen Mingxuan's clothes. "Are you awake? Do you want something to eat? These are your favorite foods." Emperor Junhua did not dare to raise his eyes to look at her, fearing to see her disdainful expression. He hurriedly filled a bowl of chicken soup for her. Humble and cautious. He has never cooked. Whether he was Emperor Junhua or Wen Mingxian, he had never cooked before. After the Wen family lost power, Xiao Yu'er never let him suffer. Xiao Yu'er didn't say anything. He got down from the soft couch and stood barefoot on the jade floor. "Do you still know what you are doing?" she asked softly. The girl has a pretty figure, but her eyebrows have a hint of awe. It is a serious crime to kidnap the incarnation of heavenly Dao and prevent it from returning to its place. Emperor Junhua did not answer. He only held the bowl and looked at her carefully. "This is the wild mushroom I brought back from the mortal world. It is your favorite mountain mushroom chicken soup. Would you like to try it?" Dai Junhua's palms were so hot that several blisters appeared. "Before, you always made chicken soup for me when he was in Luotian village." Xiao Yu'er would always catch various pheasants from the mountains and pick up various wild mushrooms. "And your favorite snack?" "When I was a child, I gave the snack to the princess, and you even cried. I didn't buy it, I went to the mortal world to learn it. From now on, if you want to eat, I can make it for you." The table is full of people who were her favorites in the mortal world. Xiao Yu'er chuckled, "Yes, I like it very much. At that time, when I lost my teeth, my mother gave me 3 yuan a day. I will leave 2 yuan for you. There were 2 pieces left on the table. I was drooling all night when I slept. Force it not to eat, and give the things you like the most to the people you like the most. What about you?" I handed it to the princess, who threw it on the ground and crushed it in disgust. Since then, I have never eaten this snack again. The princess' disgusted expression made it difficult for me to swallow it. The emperor's face was pale, and the hand holding the bowl trembled slightly. "There's no need for chicken soup. Since you have become a god, such worldly things are not good for your body." Xiao Yu'er shook his head gently. "This mortal life has passed. I hope the emperor can come out." She looked at the emperor steadily. The emperor took a deep breath and put down the bowl. He didn't explain himself, he just held Xiao Yu'er's hand and walked out of the hall. Xiao Yu'er's hands were slightly cold, but she didn't resist at all. Dai Junhua breathed a sigh of relief. "Little Yu'er, look, I have planted all the flowers you like in the palace. And here is the wind chime you once gave me. Xiao Yu'er, and..." Dai Junhua led her step by step in the palace, while Xiao Yu'er said nothing. Dai Junhua's eyes were slightly red, and he led her out of the cloud palace. "You want to go down to the lower world? My identity does not allow me to go down to the lower world at will." Xiao Yu'er shook her head, "and her every move must not be messed up. I will protect you." Junhua hugged her and jumped off the cloud. A streak of piercing white light broke through the sky. A streak of piercing lightning followed by roaring thunder struck directly. Junhua hugged Xiao Yu'er tightly, hugging Xiao Yu'er in front of him, as if he wanted to embed the tiny little girl in him. Thunder struck him, leaving dazzling and terrifying wounds one after another. Junhua's painful groan sounded, and Xiao Yu'er sighed softly, "Let me go. Why torture yourself like this?" Emperor Junhua had cold sweat pouring from his forehead. "We'll be there soon." By the time he landed on the ground, Emperor Junhua was already covered in blood. "Xiao Yu'er, I was the one who failed you in my previous life. Can I make up for it in the future?" Can I spend the rest of my life making up for the mistakes I've made? He braved the risk of thunder and punishment and returned to the mortal world with Xiao Yu'er. Do you remember? This is the Wen family, and this is the Zhang family. I asked people to repair the two houses, and asked people to take care of the house. When we were little, we were separated by a wall, and you would always sneak through the dog holes to find me. Emperor Junhua still didn't want to believe that Xiao Yu'er didn't have him in his heart. He wants to use the past to find the little fish he once was. He took Xiao Yu'er to hide himself and entered the house. This is Xiao Yu'er's room, I still remember it. Xiao Yu'er's eyebrows softened a bit as he thought of the past when he was young. Yes, because this small courtyard is on a high ground, this window can just look over the wall and see your window. Xiao Yu'er stood by the window. Later, you should seal your window. She raised her finger and pointed to the opposite side. Dai Junhua felt a stab in his heart. Before he said anything, he saw Xiao Yu'er turning over the bed in the dormitory. I saw that the little girl's thoughts were densely written on the wooden board. It was sunny on February 16th. It's so strange, why he seems to be controlled when he sees Brother Mingxian. He doesn't look like himself anymore. It was sunny on April 3rd. Brother Mingxian hates me and hates me. I felt so uncomfortable and cried all night. It rained on July 12th. I gave the umbrella to Brother Mingxian, and Brother Mingxian gave it to the princess. I went home in the rain and had a high fever for 3 days. It was a sunny day in early August. I seemed to be pushed forward, and I wanted to resist. But when I saw Brother Mingxian, I couldn't help but give up. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. My koi sister is 3.5 years old. Author, Xia Shengsheng. Chapter 476. Chapter 476, Sinking. It was sunny on April 3rd. Brother Mingxian hates me and hates me. I felt so uncomfortable and cried all night. It rained on July 12th. I gave the umbrella to Brother Mingxian, and Brother Mingxian gave it to the princess. I went home in the rain and had a high fever for 3 days. It was a sunny day in early August. I seemed to be pushed forward, and I wanted to resist. But when I saw Brother Mingxian, I couldn't help but give up. It's sunny on September 22nd, and I can hear the sounds of everything in the world at the same time. I also know that Brother Mingxian doesn't love me. It rains on September 23rd. It turns out this is what it feels like to cultivate immortality. The wooden board was filled with the girl's thoughts. She inadvertently opened the door to practice and was gradually able to resist the force that pushed her. Until the age of 15. It rained heavily in early March. Wow, I seem to be, no longer driven by fate. I am free. I can no longer follow Wen Mingxian. After that, the Wen family was framed and the whole family was executed. I owe him what I owe him, and I have to spend this life repaying it. After the girl finished writing, she seemed to pause for a moment. The ink fell on the corner, leaving a thick stroke. She added a little bit. I was born and have been his puppet all my life. I am happy for him, angry for him, and feel the same for him. It took me 15 years to break free, only to find I seem to be tempted. Every time my heart beats, it hurts so much. It seems like something is taking root in my heart. My intuition tells me that if I fall in love with him, I will never recover. But I want to try it one last time. Dai Junhua felt that his heart was tightly grasped by a pair of hands, tightening continuously. He could hardly breathe. If you want to see it and look back on the past, then go ahead. Xiao Yu'er looked at it intently, with no emotion on his face. Calm as if it was not her past. Xiao Yu'er stood straight behind Emperor Junhua. The inner thoughts of young girls in those years were completely exposed. When the two of them stood at the foot of Luotian village, decades had passed since they left the village. There is an old man telling stories under the big banyan tree, and a little child is holding grandma's hand and constantly asking, "Grandma, have you really seen a cultivator?" Have the cultivators still lived in our house? Grandma Cherry, is the immortal good looking? What does he look like? The little girl held the old man's hand and kept shaking it. Xiao Yu'er stood in the corner, the corners of his lips slightly hooked. This is the granddaughter of little Cherry. Junhua took Xiao Yu'er's hand and returned to their former home. Even if someone takes care of it, a house that has been unoccupied for decades has finally failed. The red double happiness on the door has faded and turned white. The wall that was built so hard back then is also loose and about to collapse. The roofs that were repaired back then were all broken again. You can see the sun and moon when you raise your head. The red silk has long been turned into rags and broken into pieces. The table and chairs were faded but still intact. Junhua led Xiao Yu'er into the new house. The little fish stopped outside the door. He suddenly raised his hand and covered his heart. Dai Junhua's eyes were slightly painful. Back then, he had killed the little fish who was waiting for her husband in the new house. The door creaked open. On the table were fallen wine glasses and jugs, as well as a dusty dagger. That dagger was the same one that Wen Mingxian stabbed into Xiao Yu'er's body. Xiao Yu'er closed his eyes slightly. Dai Junhua waved his sleeves, and the room suddenly changed. The red tent is warm, the candles are brightly lit, and red double happiness is plastered everywhere. Let's go back to the past, shall we? The moment he pulled Xiao Yu'er into the room. The two of them put on the red wedding clothes of that year. Back then, Xiao Yu'er's eyes were full of expectation and she was shyly waiting for her husband. Today's Xiao Yu'er has a cold expression and no emotion. Xiao Yu'er, it's my fault, it's all my fault. I shouldn't be so conceited in writing my fortune, I shouldn't use my wife as a stepping stone, I shouldn't be so conceited. As a result, you have been led by the fortune teller as a puppet for the past 15 years. I shouldn't have to uproot your love. I am responsible for all this. Xiao shall we start from the beginning? Xiao shall we start from the beginning? Can I make up for all my mistakes again? Dai Junhua raised his hand crazily and gently touched her cheek. Xiao Yu'er just closed her eyes and sat on the embroidered bed, not even wanting to look at him. Xiao Yu'er, you were born without any love roots. For my sake, you are willing to have your love roots regenerate. You have loved me, right? You are willing to regenerate your love for me. You have loved me, right? Let's start over, shall we? He looked at her humbly and foolishly. Xiao Yu'er still closed his eyes and said in a calm tone, do you know? When the roots of love are reborn, you will suffer heartbreaking pain every day. Until the roots of love break out of the ground and grow into a big tree in the sky. I endure pain every day. That red bean is growing every day, and she is trying to love you. The day you get married is when the roots of love grow. The moment the roots of love broke through the ground, you pushed the knife into your heart with your own hands and uprooted it. The red beans withered and died instantly. I have loved you, but I am also heartbroken because of you. Emperor, you are a who upholds the laws of the divine world. You understand better than anyone else that as the law of heaven, you should not have personal relationships. Now that the personal relationship is over, Emperor, you should be happy. This is what you have been looking forward to, isn't it? Now, you are not Wen Mingxian, and I am not Zhang Xiaoyu. We have all returned to our own places. Xiao Yu'er's tone was calm, not even hateful. Dai Junhua looked at her blankly. I wish you hated me. You hate me, at least you still have me in your heart. She didn't even hate me, just like. Have never been in love. I don't believe it, I don't believe it, I don't believe it. Xiao Yu'er, I don't believe it. At this moment, Emperor Junhua's eyes were red, and there was a faint light flowing in his eyes. You still love me, right? Are you just angry with me? His inner demon has not been eliminated. He dreams about Xiao Yu'er every day, making it difficult for him to distinguish between dreams and reality. He let her fall into a dream, he was already possessed by love. Xiao Yuer, look at me, Xiao Yuer. Emperor Junhua knelt down in front of Xiao Yuer, and the two sat on the bed facing each other. He raised his hand and gently untied Xiao Yuer's clothes. The long skirt slowly slid down. Smooth and delicate shoulders were exposed, as white as jade, with a hint of danger under the candlelight. His breath fell on Xiao Yuer's ear. Xiao Yuer, look at me. The voice was full of pleading, and he was begging for mercy. There was a flash of struggle in his eyes. But Xiao Yuer still kept his eyes closed, and soon his mind was occupied by his inner demon again. He looked at Xiao Yuer's face almost infatuatedly, gently stroking the cheek that made him think of being possessed. End of this chapter. My koi sister is 3.5 years old. Author, Xia Shengsheng. Chapter 477. Chapter 477. Ridiculous. The breath was intertwined, and the breath belonging to Wen Mingxian rushed towards his face. The cool hand fell on her delicate and smooth shoulder, making Emperor Junhua's eyes become more and more blood red. When the warm breath fell on her skin, Xiao Yuer's breathing paused slightly. Patches of red appeared on the fair skin. Xiao Yuer's hair was slightly scattered and intertwined with Emperor Junhua's black hair. When the breath fell on Xiao Yuer's lips, she could clearly smell a refreshing scent. Look at me, look at me. The voice of the arrogant and aloof Emperor Junhua was full of pleading. At this moment, don't you want to look at me? He was going crazy. The whole person can hardly suppress the violence that wants to destroy everything. Xiao Yuer seemed to sigh slightly, and his thick eyelashes moved slightly. It was full of red light, and the candle light was crackling. The room was filled with a faint aura of lust. She opened her eyes. He looked calmly and looked at Emperor Junhua with calm eyes. The moment their eyes met, Emperor Junhua's inner demons that were about to stir up and could not be suppressed suddenly calmed down. It's like a blazing fire being suddenly doused by a basin of cold water. Even after her clothes were taken off, her eyes were clear and pure, without a trace of desire, without a trace of affection, without a trace of emotion. Dai Junhua looked at her blankly. Xiao Yuer didn't say a word of love, but he was still lucky. But at this moment, she said nothing and only looked at him quietly. He was almost chilled to the bone. That coolness reaches straight to Tianling Gai, a shiver deep in the soul. Xiao Yuer doesn't love him anymore. Xiao Yuer really doesn't love him anymore. Emperor Junhua was trembling all over. I missed you, right? Xiao Yuer, I will never have a chance again, right? Xiao Yuer looked at him calmly. I said, there is only one chance. I was born as the incarnation of heaven and know everything. Even if I don't accidentally enter your love affair, I'll still be awake half the time. Even if I know all the fate, I still sink into it. I choose to give you a chance to give up the three realms and all living beings. The little fish is very calm. That time, let it be the only indulgence in my life. I put my only chance on you. There was a hint of mockery at the corner of her mouth. You cut off all my thoughts with one knife. Now, I can cut off all worldly ties and practice with peace of mind. On the contrary, I shouldn't hate you. I should thank you. Xiao Yuer solemnly got down from the soft bed, folded the clothes he had taken off, and saluted Emperor Junhua. Dai Junhua snorted. Blood spilled directly from the corner of his mouth. The severe pain in his heart almost overwhelmed him. The emperor is right, the love of the world is selfish and narrow, and there will be betrayal and deception. All living beings have great love, and you can tell the difference between what is light and what is serious. Xian also thanks the emperor for this experience. Dai Junhua's face was as white as paper. Experience. She regards all this as an experience. Who has trained whom? He killed her to attain enlightenment and used her as a stepping stone to pass the tribulation of love. But I don't think that I am the whetstone. Xian chose Wen Mingxian wholeheartedly and never thought of looking back. Now that I have completely let go and returned to the right path, I will naturally not hesitate for a moment. Emperor, you understand Zion's character. If you make up your mind, you will never look back. She looked at Emperor Junhua steadily. Dai Junhua's heart trembled, and her plain gaze seemed to stun him. No resentment, no hatred, just plain without a trace of emotion. Like a stranger. Forgot completely. The absurdity ends here, Emperor, please take good care of yourself. She glanced at Emperor Junhua and nodded towards him, just like the many gods in the divine world. Polite and distant. She left. Emperor Junhua fell to the ground. The joy in the house is now like a joke. Looking around in the blink of an eye, the red light in the room dimmed little by little, returning to its former desolate appearance. Outside the window, a woman with white hair tilted her head suspiciously. I'm old, I'm really old. I seem to have met Xiao Yu just now, she has ascended to become a god. The old little cherry sighed. The old man staggered away. The sky was clear just a moment ago, but in an instant, it was covered with dark clouds. The little granddaughter walked quickly and led the old grandmother back home. Grandma, Grandma, a beautiful sister just came to the house. She gave me a lot of things, do you think? The little granddaughter took out the bracelet from her arms. It was a little magic weapon. The old woman's eyes widened and she almost couldn't breathe. The young man hurriedly reassured her, are you excited again? The doctor said that you can't lose control of your emotions now. Little Cherry is old, even if she has been well taken care of these years, she is still old after all. It's Xiao Yu, it's true, Xiao Yu is back. The young man nodded with a smile, yes, she is back. Now we are different between immortals and mortals. Although we have never met, I have always thought of you. Mo Ling's face was as jade-like as ever, and he still looked young. The old woman looked at him and sighed, it's okay not to see you. Now, I have become an old lady. Mr. Gong, it's too selfish of me to keep you by my side. You'd better leave. Little Cherry has been saying this for many years. Every year, she would tell Mo Ling to leave. Mo Ling is a demon and can maintain his appearance, but Little Cherry is immortal. With the ruthless passage of time, their appearance no longer matches. Selfish? How can you be selfish? I have to rely on you to beg for nothing. Mo Ling pinched her face. We now have children, daughters, and grandchildren, and you still want to kick me out of the house. Their eldest son is now a leader in the immortal cultivation sect, who would not respect them. Your appearance remains unchanged, and outsiders secretly speculate that you are a monster. The old lady sighed. Mo Ling snickered, they already knew it. Before we got married, the village was full of ghosts and monsters. Once we got married, the village became peaceful. Later, the child became an elite of the sect, and I never committed any crime. Instead, I protected this land. Naturally, they never expelled me, so everyone knows it. The old woman laughed, it turned out that everyone knew. You can't kick me out of the house. I have half the grandchildren, Mo Ling muttered. Just half an hour ago, Xiao Yu came to look for him. Little Cherry is about to live. After Little Cherry leaves, he will turn into land and stay in this land. Protect her and her children and grandchildren. Protect the people who accepted him. It's strange, the sky was clear just now, but now there are thunderclouds. It's a scary day today. The old woman looked up at the sky. The sun was still shining brightly just now, but now the whole sky was dark, and the dense clouds made people feel heavy. Arlene, close the doors and windows. Tell the village chief not to go out if anything happens. Mo Ling looked at the small wooden house not far away. End of this chapter. My koi sister is 3.5 years old. Author, Xia Shengsheng. Chapter 478. Chapter 478, Breaking the Rules of Heaven. Little Arlene quickly got out of the house. Haunted and ran all the way, a heavy rain is coming, please close the doors and windows. The little girl's legs and feet were very fast. You are young, but your voice is very penetrating. A heavy rain is coming, please close the doors and windows." The little girl's voice was clear and could easily penetrate the entire village. When everyone heard the sound, they immediately rushed home from the fields and closed the doors and windows. The village has long suspected that Emo Ling is not immortal. This also stems from the fact that Emo Ling gave them several warnings to avoid disasters. Once upon a time, rogue bandits passed through the village. Emo Ling coaxed the whole village to go up the mountain to hunt for treasure, allowing the whole village to escape. One year there was a flood, and Emo Ling persuaded the whole village to flee to higher ground late at night, thus saving the village's food and lives. They knew that Emo Ling was a demon, but everyone knew it tacitly but did not say it out loud. Whether it's because of the eldest son practicing outside or because of Emo Ling and his wife, everyone hides the secret. Of course I believe in them very much. Arlene, this girl. The old woman sighed. She has 3 sons and 1 daughter, 4 grandsons and 2 granddaughters in total. The grandson's family lives in the town and leads an ordinary and happy life. Only the eldest son Yang Emo in the family practices in front of Lord Mingxian. After Dao Lord Mingxian left, Yang Emo stayed with the leader. He was very talented and was highly valued by the sect. Arlene has been different from others since she was a child. She has spiritual roots, the opportunity given to her by Xiao Yuer, and the boss is ascending to the immortal section. Just relax. Emo Ling patted his wife on the head. The two of them leaned against the window, looking at the stormy sky. Dai Junjunhua sat on the ground, feeling the majestic spiritual energy between heaven and earth, and looked up to the sky. Mortal people can only see the dark clouds, but they cannot see the dense generals behind the dark clouds. The generals were all holding sharp weapons, and thunderous sounds were directed at Emperor Junhua. Emperor Junhua, in vain of the divine law, indulged in the personal affairs of his children. Why don't you just arrest him without hesitation? Standing in front of the emperor, Erlang Zhenjun, is the new divine emperor who has ascended to the 7th heaven. The leader of the younger generation. He just came from the ashram just as Xiao Tiandao was undergoing calamity. Zhenjun Erlang frowned slightly, his eyes full of disbelief and shock. Emperor Junhua has been an old for 10,000 years. The most rigid, the most abiding by the rules, the most unreasonable, the most hateful of gods and selfish desires. Now it is so out of control. He even kidnapped Xiao Tiandao and brought him down to earth. You must know that his sister, the Third Holy Mother, was captured by Emperor Junhua himself. At that time, he begged Emperor Junhua to be more open-minded. Emperor Junhua was full of disdain for the 3 holy mothers who indulged in personal affairs. Not to mention being open-minded, he even wanted to use San Shengsheng's family as an example to scare the monkeys. He personally crushed Lu Yanchang's bones and raised them to ashes. The 3 holy mothers were imprisoned for thousands of years. Such a hard-hearted person actually lost control of his emotions. Yang Jian was a little in disbelief. Yang Jian was born with a handsome appearance, and now he is full of fighting spirit, even more showing the majesty of a god. Emperor Junhua had disheveled hair and smiled softly. Karma retribution. I pulled out her love roots. I will write her into the horoscope. Later, I was the one who prayed for the regeneration of love roots. I killed her to preach. It was she who became enlightened. She dares to love and hate, she can abandon everything to love. You can also put it down without looking back, without leaving any room. Dai Junjunhua smiled lowly, dark clouds covered the top, and a powerful pressure came down from the heaven. All the dogs in the village were lying on the ground, trembling all over. The villagers inside the house shuddered, feeling cold hairs standing on their bodies, and there was an inexplicable and frightening aura around them. The old man covered the mouths of the children at home, but he didn't know where the fear came from. Boom! The rumbling thunder struck the small wooden house at the end of the village. Oh, that cabin was struck by lightning, an old man exclaimed. Is it that house that no one wants? The old man shook his head. It's the house where the immortal lived. Thinking of today's thunder disaster again, no one dared to say a word because they were afraid it was related to the immortals. One after another, lightning tribulations struck down like crazy. Emperor Junhua stood up abruptly. This is the last memory I have with her. Please leave this place alone, Mr. Erlang. Erlang Zhenjun glanced at him. At that time, the Third Holy Mother begged him to let Lu Yanchang go, but he didn't spare any mercy. Emperor, this matter is not the idea of the little god. Erlang Zhenjun frowned slightly. She didn't want to leave anything behind. Emperor Junhua stared blankly at the sky, letting the rain wet his clothes and cheeks. I don't want to leave any trace behind. Xiao Yuer, I don't want to leave him a single thought. Dai Junhua's mouth was filled with blood again. Watching helplessly as thunders from the sky cut this place into ashes. The broken and heavy jade pendant around his waist suddenly flew into the sky. Dai Junhua's eyes were about to split, and the veins on his cheeks were bulging. No, 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 Erlang Zhenjun, please. He tried to reach out and grab it. He actually humbly prayed to Erlang Zhenjun. This was his last thought, the last thing Xiao Yuer left for him. This is the only token that can prove their love. Erlang Zhenjun's weapons shook. Junhua Daijun, for such a small jade pendant. Actually begged him. End of this chapter. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. My koi sister is 3.5 years old. Author, Xia Shengsheng. Chapter 479. Chapter 479 The Unrecoverable Wife. Emperor. This thing is the one who entrusted it. Erlang Zhenjun sighed. He waved his hand gently, and thunder tribulations fell one after another. The roaring thunder made people feel frightened, and it struck straight at the broken jade in the sky. Dai Junhua tried to stop him several times, but his back was covered in blood after being hit by the thunder. He also held onto the jade pendant tightly and refused to let go. Erlang Zhenjun frowned. Bring Emperor Junhua back to the divine realm. All the gods and generals stepped forward one after another and respectfully and forcefully invited the emperor to return to the divine realm. The emperor staggered to his feet in embarrassment, with blood in his palms sticking to the jade pendant. His face was full of rejoicing, and he clutched the jade pendant tightly and refused to let go. As the gods left, the dark clouds here began to fade. In a blink of an eye, the peace and tranquility of the past were restored. The blue sky makes people feel trance-like. All this is like a dream. Oh, that cabin was split, the villagers exclaimed. Little Cherry wiped her tears. Oh, why did Xiao Yuer's family get chopped up? I don't even think about it anymore. The little granddaughter stood beside her, putting her feet up and looking at the sky. What are you looking at? Watch out for falling. The old lady patted her granddaughter on the head. I seem to see gods, many, many gods standing on the clouds. The old lady smiled kindly. You are talking nonsense again. Amoling glanced at her granddaughter. This girl has spiritual roots and can often see things that mortals cannot. He looked towards the clouds and saw the gods gradually disappearing. Erlang Zhenjun suddenly looked back at him. Merlington bowed respectfully. Zhenjun Erlang nodded and took the emperor back to the god realm. The atmosphere in Zhozongtian is quite solemn. The emperor of heaven and the queen mother of Yaokai looked solemn, and the holy lord Yuyuan was waiting here. Seeing that Emperor Junhua's clothes were covered in blood, the several divine kings all sighed. The emperor's eyes were dark. Emperor Junhua, the first in ancient times. Different from the creator god and Fujuxiao, he was born in response to heaven and earth. Born to support the laws of the three realms, the most strict one is self-discipline. Represents the majesty and divine law of the divine realm. Over the years, he has strictly abided by the rules of the god realm and did not allow anyone to break the law. Junhua, you are an old who has lived for tens of thousands of years. Drink this glass of water, forget everything, and come down to earth again to experience the calamity of inner demons. The Queen Mother waved her hand and brought a small teapot. If the gods have personal affairs, they will no longer be able to judge the three realms impartially. This is what you said, Junhua. It's better to go back and forget everything. It's still too late now, Holy Lord Yu sighed. Back then, Emperor Junhua ordered the gods not to have personal affairs, but now, he has fallen into it. Junhua frowned slightly, holding the jade pendant in his palm, and drops of blood fell down. Everything in the past has been destroyed, can't even the memory be left. Just let me stay. Emperor Junhua stood in the main hall and showed a wry smile. Junhua, you know the rules of the divine world. The Emperor of Heaven looked a little serious. She is the incarnation of heaven, ordained by heaven. She is indispensable in the three realms. He couldn't even imagine that Junhua could be so crazy. You kidnapped the incarnation of Heavenly Dao and tried to prevent Heavenly Dao from returning to its proper place. Do you know that you were wrong? Junhua shook his head and slowly knelt in front of the hall. Junhua made a big mistake and knew that his sin was serious. Please ask the Emperor of Heaven to punish him. But if there is no water, Junhua will never drink it. You have no regrets, and you will never forget each other. His only regret was that he did not seize the opportunity she gave him. He once stubbornly wanted to reverse time and space and go back to the moment when they met. But she is the incarnation of heaven, and time can be reversed, but she cannot reverse the memory of what has happened to her. He didn't even have a chance. The Emperor of Heaven took a deep breath. Here, please come to the immortal platform, Emperor Junhua. Zuxian Terrace is the place where the gods are killed and the gods are punished. Junhua was taken to Zuxian Terrace. The surroundings of the Zuxian platform were filled with fierce winds. Emperor Junhua was stripped of all his spiritual power, and he knelt in the center of the Zuxian platform wearing only a middle coat. Please give me a whip. With gods gradually appearing around, the gods did not dare to approach because they were all afraid of the power of the whip. Hitting the with a whip can make the so painful that he cannot wish to live, nor can he wish to die. Snapped. Snapped. Lashes of whips came through the air, and even Gangfeng fled in all directions. Hit the Emperor Junhua on the back, and his aura was removed, making him extremely fragile, and blood spattered everywhere in an instant. With just one whip, he was knocked to the ground. Then he staggered up again and slowly knelt down. Junhua has no regrets, he whispered. The whipping of the divine whip became more violent each time. Junhua, I have no regrets. He seemed to cry and laugh at the same time. He never regretted meeting her, never falling in love with her, and never regretting this infatuated love that ended in nothing. The gods were amazed by his lack of regret. Outside the crowd, Sushui looked at her daughter worriedly. Let's go, she looked at Xian cautiously. Sushui has always had a compensatory attitude toward her two children. For the two children, I feel a little guilty deep down in my heart. She is worthy of heaven and earth, worthy of the people, but she is worthy of her two children. After giving birth to children, he did not spend a day with them before offering sacrifices to heaven and earth. When she came back from recuperation, the child came down to earth to experience calamity again. Xian looked back at his mother, and saw the worry in her eyes almost overflowing. He quickly took his mother's hand and said, Mom, don't worry about me. Fu Xiao paused and looked very calm. Mother, do you think your daughter is indifferent? Seeing him suffering, Xian didn't seem to feel any distress. Can't even make a ripple. I had chosen him, but he let go of my hand without hesitation. Just because he turned back as a prodigal son, do I have to forgive him? There will never be reconciliation after a broken situation, and apologies and repentance will not change the hurt suffered. Besides, my daughter feels that the stars and the sea are far more reliable than men. The little girl smiled, her eyebrows were curved, and her expression was full of calmness. I have let it go, but he can't let it go. He is just torturing himself. Sushui pinched her daughter's cheek. How could she be indifferent? She speaks well and looks like what my mother most expected. Yan, do you really want to be the way of heaven? If you don't want to, I will risk my life to let you choose. Sushui finally said this. Fu Ziyan also looked at his mother solemnly. Mom, I love this world. Every plant, every tree, every flower, every bird, they all tell the beauty of the world. I love them all so much. She stretched out her hand, and the breeze passed through her fingertips, and she suddenly changed. Have to be happy. Yan Sushui was startled, feeling a little confused. It seemed like she had missed something. Mom, let's go back and have a feast. My eldest brother is getting married. I want to see him. Shy Zion took his mother and rushed towards the world. Your eldest brother is not shy. The emperor is the most shameless. Sushui has experienced that the royal family is the most shameless and shameless. The two of them came back from the god realm and happened to see the emperor and empress getting married. End of this chapter. My koi sister is 3.5 years old. Author, Xia Sheng. Chapter 480. Chapter 480. The relationship between mother and daughter is shallow. The queen is both talented and beautiful, and she is even more dignified and virtuous. Anyone who sees her will praise her. Fu Huizi has a dignified appearance and is even more handsome. The two of them stood together, quite a match. After the two got married, they served tea to Fu Juxiao and Yan Sushui. Father, drink tea. Mother, drink tea. The two of them kowtowed to heaven and earth, and offered sacrifices to the queen. They were a couple recognized by heaven and earth. The procedures for an emperor's wedding are complicated, and only the queen has this honor. From now on, all are concubines. Yan Sushui was afraid that he would be harmed if he married too early, so he delayed the wedding until he was 18. Because the royal family has few heirs for many years, the courtiers asked Your Majesty to receive both rain and dew. Fu Huizi was not obsessed with women, but he did not favor anyone except the queen. Until the queen was pregnant with the emperor's heir. Until the birth of the emperor's eldest son, Fu Huizi appointed the prince on the spot. Only then did Fu Huizi begin to favor the concubines in the palace. Although he had no intention of being emperor, he was born to be an emperor. What's more, as Yan Chuan is the chief assistant and his uncle, he has been taught by the chief assistant since he was a child. How could he be confused? The harem can only last long if the queen is respected and the prince is valued. Fu Ziyan likes his nephew very much and often teases him. The little prince is also very close to her. Yan Sushui and Fu Juxiao never went anywhere during this period, so they often took their daughter on sightseeing tours. The two have a close relationship as mother and daughter, and they don't know when they will be separated. Sushui cherishes the time spent with her daughter. On this day, Sushui suddenly saw a little girl and was stunned. The little girl is about 2 or 3 years old. She is smart and cute. The gentlewoman held the little girl's left hand, and the tall and majestic man held her right hand. When the man's eyes fell on the little girl, his eyes softened instantly. Daddy, ride a big horse, ride a big horse, the little girl shouted, spreading her arms. The man was followed by a group of slaves. He squatted on the street without any scruples and let his daughter ride on his neck. You, don't spoil the child, the woman smiled softly. The man laughed lowly, I gave birth to 8 sons, so I have such a daughter. Who can I not tolerate? Hold on tight, let's go, ride the big horse. The laughter spread far and wide. Sui Sui suddenly raised her hand and found that she was actually crying. Strange, I actually feel something familiar, I have never seen it before, but when she saw the little girl's wanton smile, she couldn't help crying. That's the little daughter of General Chen's family. After giving birth to 8 sons, I got a daughter. I was so happy that I laid out a running water mat for 3 days. Fujuxiao recognized the man. I was stabbed all over on the battlefield, and even though I vomited blood and made a hole, I didn't even frown. Because his daughter's skirt was ruined, when her daughter cried, he cried louder than her. Sushui grinned hearing this. That little girl has really met a perfect family. Fuzian turned to look at the little girl. It turned out to be a perfect family. The 10th Palace Yama will never deceive me. Grandma, live a good life in this life. Before they had taken a few steps, they heard someone beating gongs and drums and shouting. Come, come, let's watch the show. There is no such store after passing this village. Those who have money support a financial field, and those who have no money support a personal field. Fellow villagers, take a look. The man with the mustache shouted loudly, and the people quickly gathered around him. Boy, what kind of performance are you doing? Someone asked. The man smiled mysteriously and immediately asked someone to open the tightly covered cage. There was a pig in the cage. Everyone was in an uproar and immediately pinched their noses. You kid, what's so good about pigs? They really stink. Hey, my pig is no ordinary pig. I, a pig, refused to eat pig food when I was born. I lived in a pig pen and screamed all day long until I vomited blood. Guess what? It wants to sleep in people's houses and eat people's food. But it's psychic. I can still read, I can even beg for food. Everyone became interested when they heard it and looked at it with great enthusiasm. The man took out a wooden stick and hit the pig with the stick. The pig immediately knelt on its front knees and kowtowed. Everyone was amazed when they saw it. After a few laps, the man indeed received a lot of rewards. The pig raised its head. Then he saw Yan Sushui's family directly in front of him, and his eyes turned red instantly. He rushed towards Yan Sushui's position like crazy. Be bold. Guard you. Everyone heard a cry of surprise, and then saw the pig's head fall to the ground. His eyes were still staring in the direction of Yan Sushui, and everyone looked at him with fear. Boss, are you raising a pig demon? Why are you still hurting people? I'm scared to death. If I bump into that little lady, I'm afraid I'll die or be disabled. Everyone was frightened for a while. When a man saw a pig being killed, he was heartbroken, but he took care of himself. The other party was so vicious that he didn't dare to compensate. This pig is quite spiritual. There are indeed many wonders in the world. Sushui was very surprised. Fuzian glanced at the pig's head and fell into the trap of an animal, but he still didn't regret it. Fujuxiao seemed to have figured out the way, and just smiled and said, I guess I accidentally opened my mind. After Sushui was sacrificed, his power was greatly weakened. Naturally, he could no longer calculate the past and future lives. But this way, maybe you will be happier. End of this chapter.